1 month before I turned 59, someone else decided that I was retired. A sudden job loss crash-landed my retirement sooner than I expected. A decade later, though, I can honestly say it was the best decision I never made. I started this channel 5 years ago to share lessons learned the hard way during my unexpected retirement. Since then, it's evolved into a true DIY retirement channel for regular people, not day traders or financial professionals, just people who want to plan and manage their own retirement. I'm sharing 7 tips for a great DIY retirement. These are 7 foundational ideas I wish I had learned on day 1. Here's what we'll cover. Number 1, know your expenses. Not a rough guess or a rough rule of thumb, but a true bottom-up budget of what you'll need to spend each year in retirement. Now, here's the problem with the rule of thumb numbers. First, many people think they'll need 70 to 80% because they think they'll stop spending as much once they retire. But sometimes its spending goes up, especially for early retirees when you're traveling more and you're paying for your pre-Medicare health care. The second problem with a rule of thumb is letting your portfolio size decide what you spend rather than your real life telling you what you need to spend. I didn't follow that 4% rule because I was waiting for 70 for Social Security and I knew I needed to withdraw a little bit more than 4%. Here's exactly how I built my retirement budget from the bottom up and how I still update it every year. Now, you start with your fixed monthly and annual expenses from your checking account. If you have a mortgage or a rent check, property taxes, insurance premiums, car payments, any other regular recurring expenses. Next, figure out your variable but predictable spending, your groceries, utilities, gas, dining out, charitable giving and gifts. Pull 12 months of your bank and your credit card statements. If you have any miscellaneous categories, as I did in 2015, take time to sort them out so you're using real numbers, not guesses. Now, my wife and I keep track of our spending by using a few credit cards, which we pay off every month. But we download those transactions into Quicken, so spending is sorted automatically into the right budget categories. Quicken allows me to sort the generic food and dining from the credit card, for instance, into essential spending on groceries and discretionary spending on dining. Set up those categories and use them consistently. If you don't want to use Quicken or another aggregator, look for a credit card that allows you to download the transactions into your own spreadsheet. Your retirement spending will also include some irregular big ticket items like a new roof or major home repairs or a big trip or a sewer line replacement last year. If you can forecast them, go ahead. Some people like Fritz Gilbert of the Retirement Manifesto set up sinking funds for these categories, which makes sense from an accounting standpoint. But I use a 3-bucket strategy with 3 years of spending in bucket 1 and 5 years of spending in bucket 2. In my first decade, the bucket strategy has given me the wiggle room to handle these expenses without a dedicated sinking fund. You do need to plan for healthcare costs. You have to consider what it's going to cost for COBRA or the Affordable Care Act before Medicare, but also estimate what you will need to spend on Medicare and Medigap and drug coverage after 65. Quicken has a budget feature, and you can develop a budget right there. And there are reports to review month-to-month spending or spending over time. But I found it easier to download data from Quicken into a simple budget spreadsheet with a rolling multi-year moving average for the categories. I posted a sample of that spreadsheet on my Google site. Look for a link in the description below. Download it, start your own spreadsheet, plug in your numbers, and you've got a DIY retirement budget. Now, after a decade of DIY retirement, I can tell you the spending doesn't stay flat and consistent. You have to manage it by knowing your expenses. About a year ago, I showed this pie chart with 7-year averages. Housing, even without a mortgage, were about 26% when you include utilities, home repair, home insurance, and property taxes. Auto and travel expenses made up about 9% of our average over the 7-year period. Food was 15%. Health, medical insurance, and copays was 17%. Federal and state taxes were 10%. And all other made up the other quarter of our monthly budget. I updated this pie chart for 2026 budget. An inherited house that needed repairs plus our own house with normal repairs pushed house up to a third of our spending. Auto and travel rose to 11%. Food stayed consistent at about 15%. On the bright side, now that we're both on Medicare, healthcare costs have dropped from 17 to 11%. Taxes are 12%, and all other expenses make up 18%. Once you know exactly what you will spend, the next question is, where are you getting the money now that you're no longer working? Well, that's where you have to look at your fixed income, your Social Security, and then what you will need to withdraw from a portfolio that has been invested simply and cheaply. If this helped, will you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe? It'll help new viewers find this channel. Number 2, invest simply and cheaply. Use broad index funds with rock bottom expense ratios. Buy the whole haystack instead of hunting for the needle in that haystack that might beat the market. In 2025, 8 in 10 active fund managers underperformed the S&P 500. This is from the longest running study of active versus passive investing from the S&P Dow Jones Indices Company. In most years you see here, active managers failed to beat the market. If you look at the results over the past decade, the statistics are even worse for active management. Less than 1 in 10 active managers can beat the market index. Picking winners sounds strategic, but it's not. And market timing, nobody does it. Certainly not those experts on TV. All sophisticated strategies have one thing in common. They cost more and deliver less. My approach to simple investing is to organize your money by time. I use a 3-bucket approach. Some people use a 2-bucket or a barbell approach. In my case, bucket 1 has cash and equivalents that I'll need in the next 3 years. The investing decision is easy. Take no risk. Go to the bank. In bucket 2, I have income-producing assets. Safe investments that I'll use in the following 5 years. These include treasuries and tips and reliable income-producing assets. Then all other retirement assets are in bucket 3, invested for the long-term growth to beat inflation over the coming decade. For the growth in bucket 3, I follow 3 simple principles. First principle is buy the haystack, don't hunt for the needle. When you buy a U.S. stock market index, you own a slice of every publicly traded American company, large, small, mid-cap. Pair that with an international index, and you own a piece of thousands of public companies worldwide. When one company fails, you barely notice. When the global market grows, you grow with it. You aren't hunting for the next apple, you're making sure you don't miss it. The second principle is costs are the only thing you can control. The fee you pay is a return you don't get, compounded every single year. Let's compare 2 retirees, both with $1 million portfolio, with the same real average return of 4.3%. That's after a 3% inflation. Now I'm going to set aside contributions or withdrawals and just focus on the investment costs of that portfolio. The difference of a 0.03% expense ratio and a 1% expense ratio on that same $1 million portfolio over 20 years is staggering. The retiree with the low-cost index fund would grow the portfolio to $2.41 million. The retiree with the 1% fee on that actively managed portfolio would only grow it to $1.98 million. That is some $429,000 less than the low-cost portfolio. The third simple principle is stay the course. Long-term equity investing requires time in the market, not market timing. Our retirement portfolio has endured big market declines in 2018 and 2020 and 2022. The portfolio recovered. The people who sold or stayed on the sidelines didn't fare as well. The bucket strategy gives you permission to stay the course. You can let the stocks ride because you know the grocery money that you need in the next few years is safely in bucket one. Staying the course also means you rebalance the portfolio on a schedule, not based on market news or emotion. That simple low-cost strategy may be boring, but it works. Assets that you need for short-term spending are invested for safety. Long-term assets are invested for growth through broad, low-cost total market index funds. Hey, the Haystack works. 10 years in, this approach still is working for us. Buy the Haystack, focus on controlling costs, and stay the course with a simple bucket strategy for your DIY retirement. Number 3, don't overpay for advice. That 1% AUM fee sounds small, but 1% of your nest egg every year adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 30-year retirement.
We already showed you how much more a 1% AUM is going to cost versus a low-cost ETF over the decades of your retirement. Instead of the dollars, I'm going to look at some of the cents on why you should be in charge of your own retirement. As I explained in this video over here, the fiduciary fallacy, the real fallacy is that you need to trust someone else more than yourself. The real fiduciary in your DIY retirement is you. You're the one that's going to act in your own best interest. Fiduciary duty is a responsibility and a legal standard. And if somebody is a fiduciary, they should act like a fiduciary. If they're a trusted advisor, they should offer you advice that you can trust. If you don't trust that advice, get a new trusted advisor. Just earlier this year, in March of 2026, the Department of Labor finally shelved that second attempt to install a fiduciary rule on all people offering advices in retirement plans. Now that is the second time this fiduciary rule was proposed, but then shelved. Governmental rules will change, but you are in charge of your retirement. So what is a 1% AUM financial planner really selling you with this idea that I'm going to take 1% of your retirement assets each year and that'll be my fee? What are they selling? Well, they're selling trust. They're selling you that they are smarter than you and it's worth 1% of your retirement pot each year to get their advice. And I'm just here to tell you that's not always the case. In many cases, a DIY retirement is going to save you money and empower you to enact a low-cost retirement plan as opposed to some of the really complicated plans that fiduciaries come up with. An AUM advisor is going to be incented to keep the AUM pot pretty big, and that is not always the best course for your retirement. But one of the things AUM advisors stress is that they're here to hold your hand during times when the market gets rough. Well, that's a lot of hand holding for 30 years. good years and bad years. And by the way, when a fiduciary says that we only make money when you make money, they're not telling you the truth. They make money whether you make money or lose money. They make a percent every year out of your retirement pot. So I've also seen in bogglehead chat groups and other social media where AUM advisors have gotten retirees into some very expensive products. Here are some of the things that could be snuck into a 1% AUM a retirement that may end up costing you a lot of money. An annuity product, a actively managed mutual fund with a high expense ratio on top of the 1% AUM. Well, if I go to my CPA or my estate planner, they charge me a fee for their work. Sometimes it's by the hour, but mostly it's by a project fee. And I know that I don't have to pay an AUM calculated fee to an estate planner on the size of my estate. And I don't have to pay an AUM-based fee for my tax return on a complex year based on the size of my estate. As I say, it's your retirement, so always do your own due diligence and hire a professional if you need one. If you need one, I strongly suggest you go with advice-only planners. I'll put some links to some well-known organizations that concentrate on this advice-only form of financial planning. But I would start with getting free advice from trusted advisors, and don't let people tell you that, well, that's a commission-based broker or a life insurance agent selling you something. Again, they're offering you advice. Listen to the advice, you make the decisions. Again, I believe a DIY retirement is a better choice for many of us. We don't have complicated retirements unless somebody else convinces us we do. Make it simple and do it yourself. The math adds up to a scary story if you overpay for advice. As we talked about it could cost you hundreds of thousands in fees over the decades of your DIY retirement. But the other way it harms you is that it takes power away from you and gives it to others. Rather than do that, be educated and tackle the job yourself.
Number 4, use the right planning tools. I'll show you how I use Boldin for long-range projections. I've been using it since it was called New Retirement. But I'll also show you how I've developed some simple ways of tracking asset allocation and risk. Most retirees ask the wrong question. They say, how is my portfolio doing today? They may look at their monthly or quarterly statements to see how they're tracking. But what they should be looking at is, will this plan last the next 30 years? Between Social Security timing and tax shifts and healthcare costs, no DIY spreadsheet can accurately portray your long-range picture. For the big picture, professionals use expensive software that costs from $2,000 to nearly $5,000 a year per seat. That's money that the firms pass on to their clients through those high AUM fees. But DIY retirees need to find options that can offer most of what that pro software does at a fraction of the cost. We need to run a Monte Carlo projection or plan for tax strategies and use a Social Security optimizer and do some what-if scenarios, but we need to find it for free or under $150 a year, sort of like what a TurboTax might cost. I've used Boldin for that big picture, but there is a massive blind spot in its software. And stick around and I'll show you the tools that I use to round out my view of retirement. Now, I've been using Boldin since 2019 when it was called New Retirement. You can see a whole playlist of prior videos that I've done on the software. And by the way, I'm not a Boldin partner. I'm not sponsored by Boldin on this channel. I'm just a long-term user. Here's why I still go to it for my long-range planning. It excels at long-range income and spending projections. You can model your spending to change by decade, and you can explore various income streams like a part-time job for the next 5 years. Boldin also includes a Social Security Explorer to model claiming strategies of 62 versus 67 versus 70. And I've discussed its Roth Conversion Explorer, which helps you to see a series of Roth conversions over several years that may help minimize your taxes in retirement. Boldin also gives you options to change the assumptions on inflation and healthcare spending and investment returns. Broker options like Fidelity and Schwab and Vanguard sometimes lock in those assumptions. It does provide the Monte Carlo analysis as well as its own optimistic and pessimistic forecasts. And it allows you to compare various scenarios. Now, here's the honest part. No sponsored review of Boldin will tell you, and it's exactly why I need other tools. While Boldin can show you the tax buckets, as in this picture from the Insights of Net Worth, it cannot show you the overall asset allocation of your portfolio today. So while Boldin does long-range planning, it doesn't clearly show where you are today with your overall asset allocation. And if you use a 3-bucket retirement strategy, as I do, you can't see your assets by time buckets. And that's the detail that you need when you start thinking about strategic withdrawals and rebalancing and making sure you have tactical asset location within your tax bucket. My portfolio by bucket spreadsheet does what Boldin can't do. It shows me the overall asset allocation, and I can see asset allocation across 3 time buckets and 3 tax buckets. At a glance, I can see where I can rebalance in my tax deferred accounts, and I can ensure that I have the right asset locations within taxable and tax-free accounts. Now, there are other tools like Empower, which was formerly Personal Capital, that can provide this global overall asset allocation, but it can't show a time bucket view. Now, you can download my spreadsheet to see if you can adapt it as a tool that will help supplement Boldin's long-range projections for your retirement. Finding the right tools, sometimes using a pair of pliers and a screwdriver to bolt down your DIY retirement plan. The goal of these tools is not to make retirement planning more complicated, but it's to give you confidence. And when you can see the whole plan, the long-range view, and day-to-day, you can stop making decisions out of fear and start making them out of clarity. Number 5, maximize your Social Security. Tailor it for your exact circumstances. But if you are a couple, plan as a couple. Most people think of Social Security as a savings account, money put into it through their working years and then money taken out. The goal in that time frame is to get your money back as fast as possible. File early, collect longer. I have a whole playlist on Social Security, including this one, The Wrong Way to Think About Social Security. And it's one of my more popular videos on this channel. Social Security is longevity insurance. Its primary job is to protect you and your spouse against the risk of living a very long time. In that reframe, it changes the timing decision. Every year you delay past your full retirement age, your benefit continues to grow all the way to 70. About 8% a year. That's a guaranteed inflation-adjusted increase. And when you get that benefit at 70, it's inflation adjusted for life. I don't know of another investment on the fixed side of investments where you can get a guaranteed 8% return. Now, if you're single, the break-even point, where waiting pays off more than filing early, is typically somewhere in your late 70s. And if you've lived to 65, the chances are you are going to live past your late 70s. But if you're married, married couples need to plan together. If one spouse will rely on spousal benefits, the planning is even more important. But from the start of this channel, when I said I was waiting for 70, I've concentrated on survivor benefit. When one spouse dies, the surviving spouse gets to keep one of two Social Security checks and loses the lower one. And that's it. That one check will be there for the rest of their life. So if you file early and lock in a reduced benefit and then you die first, your spouse inherits that reduced benefit for life. Now, my wife is about 4 years younger than me, and statistically, she's likely to outlive me. So the Social Security check that she inherits when I'm gone is the one that I'm building right now, month by month, by waiting a few more months until age 70. Now, that's not an abstract calculation for me. That's her financial security. Now, I'll be honest with you, waiting for 70 is not the right answer for everyone. If your health is poor, waiting may not make mathematical sense. If you've got a guaranteed pension and Social Security is just a layer on top, maybe the calculation is different for you. If both of you have Social Security benefits that are about equal, spousal benefits won't matter. If you're single without a survivor benefit to consider, the math is different. There's no universal right answer. There's only one answer for your situation, which is why you need to run the numbers to maximize Social Security for your retirement. Don't follow somebody else's decision. Now, the two tools I trust for this are Open Social Security. It's a great free site by Mike Piper where you can maximize your Social Security given a number of circumstances. And Boldin's Social Security Explorer, so you can see how the timing decision ripples across your entire long-range financial plan. By the way, Marie filed for hers last December, and so the Explorer doesn't work for me. I had to go in and change her to not filed yet to do some counterfactual scenarios. Take a moment to please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more DIY retirement tips. Hey, and be sure to check out the links below for Boldin, Open Social Security, a full playlist of Social Security videos I've done on this channel, and the playlist of these 7 quick tips for a great DIY retirement. Number 6, plan for longevity. Prepare for a long life. You may make it to 100. Wouldn't it be great if your DIY retirement plan did too?
Now, I don't assume that I'm going to live to 90 and my wife is going to live to 95. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm planning accordingly because I know that if we arrive there and we don't have any more money, that's a problem. We're going to cover 3 important things you need to consider when you're planning for longevity. Now, most of us underestimate how long we're actually going to live in retirement. The average 65-year-old male is going to live to about 83, and the average 65-year-old female is going to live to 86. But many of us will live into our 90s. And that's why it's important to think about longer than a 20 to 25 year period for retirement. Now, since I began a retirement early at 59, I've been planning for a 30+ year retirement all along. And if you're early retired, you should do that too. Now, there are 3 key areas to focus on for a planning for longevity. The first is healthcare and long-term care, and they're the biggest wild cards in your retirement. Boldin does a good job of estimating average health care based on your planned approach. If you're using original Medicare, their numbers show that a healthy couple retiring at 65 today might spend $350,000 to $450,000 in out-of-pocket costs for premiums, deductibles, and the things that Medicare doesn't cover, including dental, vision, and hearing. But then there's long-term care. Home health aides, assisted living and nursing homes, except in the limited cases for nursing homes, is not covered by Medicare. And if you need that kind of long-term care, it could run from $60,000 to $120,000 a year, depending upon where you live. Now, about 70% of those over 65 will need some sort of long-term care. Boldin's default is to assume roughly $118,000 in today's dollars for the final 28 months on average of your lifespan. Now, that's helpful, and they'll plug it in, but it might be a little bit too conservative for your case. Now, if you have long-term care insurance, they're going to assume that you're going to pay 20% of that nut, and insurance will cover the rest. But if you're going to cover that from home equity or your home savings, they will take that expense out in those final 28 months. You might want to alter those parameters by adding expenses in targeted years. My mom was in assisted care living for 7 years, for instance, in Pennsylvania. So adjust your estimates for long-term care based on your conditions. So the second major factor is to invest in withdrawal for the long haul to beat inflation. Now, you need three things to work together for your withdrawal strategy, and that is reliable income, smart withdrawals, and continued growth of your portfolio. Now, in my last tip, we talked about maximizing Social Security, which gives you the best inflation-protected guaranteed income for most people. But you also need to stay invested in a simple, low-cost total market index so that your portfolio grows enough to fight inflation. Now, I've used 3% in the past decade, and we all saw how that turned out. I now model 4% for inflation. And by the way, back to our last point, I have set a higher medical inflation rate. I'm using 6%. Now, as you know, I also use a 3-bucket strategy or time segmentation to stay flexible on the spending. Overspending early or locking into a rigid 4% rule can drain your savings faster than you expect. And now the third factor to consider in longevity planning is to think about the non-financial side of the story as well. And that's where a lot of DIY retirees fall short. But you can save money and stress with some planning for longevity. So the first thing you need to consider is to update your legal documents, your wills and your durable power of attorney for financial and health care. Consider a living will or a directive, and also consider a revocable trust so that you can make sure those things are set before you need them. Also, talk to your spouse and your children about health care preferences while you're healthy, and most importantly, invest in your own health and social life. Regular exercise, strong friendships, and managing those chronic conditions like high blood pressure and cholesterol now will help reduce and delay the need for expensive care later. So as a DIY retiree, I plan for 90, not because I know that I'll get there, but that if I do, I want to be prepared and have the resources to enjoy a DIY retirement.
And finally, number 7, stick with it. Stay the course. Be true to your plan. The single biggest threat to your retirement isn't a market drop or inflation or a surprise expense. It's you. The urge to panic, sell, chase hot funds, or overreact to the news. So here are 3 traps to avoid. Trap number 1, panic selling. The market drops 20 to 30% and your gut screams, get out. Trap 2, chasing performance. Last year's winner looks irresistible. And trap 3, overreacting to the headlines. Every day brings a new crisis. Now, I've felt each of those temptations to panic in the last decade. The market declines in 2018, a pandemic in 2020, inflation soaring in 2021, Terrible year for stocks and bonds in 2022, and those tariff terrors in 2025. The financial media makes it all worse. They need you glued to the screen, so they sell fear and urgency. But a calm, diversified, low-cost portfolio doesn't make for dramatic TV. Jack Bogle said it perfectly. When everyone else around you is shouting, "Don't just stand there, do something," often the right move is the opposite. Don't do something, just stand there. That line saved me more than once. Now, what gave me the discipline to actually stand there? The 3-bucket strategy that we covered in tip number 2. When the market dropped hard, I knew I had 3 years of expenses in bucket 1 in cash and equivalents. I did not have to sell stocks at a loss, and so I didn't. And the market recovered. It always has historically. The structure didn't just protect my portfolio, it protected my peace of mind. The math said stay the course, while my gut was screaming something else. The buckets gave me permission to listen to the math instead of the noise. Now, a 1% AUM advisor would dismiss this as just mental gymnastics with a bucket strategy. They want to sell you a peace of mind, someone to call when the panic hits. And that has value, but you're paying for that every year, good markets and bad. The DIY alternative is to set up a simple structure that you can stick with. Understanding your clear expenses, relying on simple low-cost investing, avoiding those unnecessary fees, using solid planning tools like Boldin, maximizing your Social Security, and planning for longevity. All of that adds up to give you the same level of confidence without the ongoing drag to your nest egg from an AUM advisor. But always do your own due diligence. If you need a personalized plan and you need help, do it with an advice-only plan at a flat fee from a fiduciary. Now, here are 5 lessons that I want you to take away from this series. 1 is the plan matters more than a perfect portfolio. Know why you own something and when you need that money, and that's often a lot more important than the exact total market fund that you are in. 2, expenses are the one thing you get to control, either your investment expenses or the expenses in your spending. Markets may fluctuate, but if you could be flexible with your spending decisions, you can win. Revisit that bottom-up budget every year. And number 3, tax planning is retirement planning. Roth conversions, ACA cliffs early in retirement, and IRMA surcharges later in retirement. These often matter more than chasing returns. 4, healthcare cost will surprise you. Give it its own line item and plan for higher costs. And 5, staying the course is a skill, not a personality trait. It gets easier with a simple structure and the right tools, and after you've lived through a couple recoveries. I'll be honest, this is what's worked for me in my first decade of retirement, but I believe the principles will travel, but run your own numbers. 10 years ago, someone else decided I was retired. I didn't choose to start, but I chose what came next. And you can too. This is a DIY retirement. It's not perfect, but it's yours. I'll close with my standard warning. I am not a professional. I have no initials after my name. So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated DIY retiree to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out that professional if you need one.